All right, Gavin. Last night we watched the big, bold, beautiful journey, starring Colin Farrell and Margot Robbie. And Gavin, we're the only two people that actually enjoyed this movie across the whole entire landscape of the world. It made
It's actually bad.
when the reports came out and the
You had
reviews
me
came out about this movie.
so ready to be disappointed by this movie based on what everybody was saying about this movie. I mean, we were going to walk into the theaters, and Brett turns to me and he goes, "Yeah, well, I mean, this is going to be a tough movie." And I thought he was talking about Him, which, to be fair, I'd seen all the reviews about Him. I knew that it was going to be a tough watch going in. And he goes, "No, no, no. The Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey is getting absolutely forked over online." And I went,
Slaughtered.
"What?"
I mean, I honestly just ripped
Really?
apart.
And I was like, "Then no, that's not right. That can't be right." And he goes, "Yeah, dude, they said there's no chemistry. The story's bland. The movie's just awful." And I went, "Did we sign up to do a double feature of bad films? We've never done a double feature of bad films. When we saw Jurassic World, we at least got to see F1 after.
F1.
When we saw, I don't even remember what movie precluded 28 years later, but it was so bad I can't remember. And we saw 28 years later after, and it was amazing. And I thought, okay, great. So at least when we do bad double features, one of them's always at least decent, if not great. There's no way we signed ourselves up for the first awful double feature of our time, like 30 movies in.
Oh my God. And listen, they can say what they want. Me and you both have different opinions on this movie. Okay? And I'm not going to sit here and say it was the greatest thing I've ever seen in the world. But for the genre itself, when we're talking about like romance movies and telling a good story, immediately after to you, I said, if this movie was a book, it would be a best-selling novel.
I want to read that book. Exactly. I remember turning to you and telling you, I want to read that book. If that book does exist somewhere, comment the title and author down below. I will go get and read that book. I will, because it would be such a good book. Like, the premise of this story is actually so good. Two random strangers who suck at love. I mean, just have had the worst stretch. They're in their 30s, approaching 40, just failing at relationships, failing at love, failing at finding the person they're supposed to be with, who get the weirdest rental car agency in the entire planet. I mean, comically funny, but so strange. And they get stuck with these GPSs that start talking to them and take them on really a big, bold, beautiful journey. It's such a simple concept, but it's so good, and it dives into their pasts, their relationships with their families, their parents, their friends. I mean, you get so many things about their lives and how it can develop into their relationships, and it makes for a good movie that could have been better, and it would make an amazing book.
Yeah. And one thing I want to talk about right off the rip is the biggest thing that people had to complain about was Margot Robbie and Colin Farrell's chemistry with each other.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, that was the biggest thing. Like, although they're great individually and although they're great individual actors, they felt that the writing or them acting together just didn't like hit, or there were certain parts that were cringy, whatever, they came up with. And I guess I respect everyone's opinions, but I disagree with that wholeheartedly in this. There are some points where I do feel like Colin Farrell was definitely better than Margot Robbie in certain scenes with like connecting and like saying their lines or delivery. But at the same time, I thought their chemistry was fine. I didn't think it was cringy. I didn't think it was bad. The biggest thing that we talked about was it was a little slow, and that they probably could have cut some things out of the movie. But overall, I didn't think Colin Farrell and Margot Robbie did a bad job at all. I thought they were great on screen.
On-screen chemistry, Zero was never on screen. I don't know
Yes.
where we got the number 0 from. For them to say they never had on-screen chemistry is ridiculous, because there wasn't a scene in the movie where I thought they had 0. There was some where,
Yeah.
like you said, I felt like one wasn't pulling enough weight as much as the other, or, you know, Colin was giving a much more heartfelt performance and Margot wasn't able to keep up. But I never felt like there was 0 chemistry on screen.
No. And part of it I felt like was kind of like the writing. You know, it was sort of a little like cliche or cringy. And, you know, if Margot Robbie was more or less, it felt like she was just saying her lines rather than just like playing the character. But what am I to say about that too, when she's like one of the greatest actresses of our generation, by the way? But I don't understand how people can't, because this is a good story. This is a good original idea. And I never felt bored. I never felt like, what am I watching here? Or, you know, this movie's all over the place. It was a good linear story that fought, and it stayed in line, which is what I liked about it. Not only that, me and you are big character developing people. And ever since I got into reading and stuff like that, I love getting backstory of characters and love little moments that give you more about the character, give more backstory about the character. And we got so much of that with each individual character for David and Sarah. And that's what I liked about it too. Me and you were talking about too, we wish that they introduced a lot of interesting characters, like the AI of the car and then the rental car place. But I like that they focus strictly on David and Sarah and their backstories and their relationships with love. And listen, I understand, you know, we live in a different generation where, you know, we have to have almost this like crazy, you know, these crazy stories. It's got to be the greatest thing. We've had some of the best stories ever told with like shows like Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Game of Thrones. And we've had some of the best movies with like Christopher Nolan, Oppenheimer, and stuff like that. But these types of movies are what I appreciate. Original ideas that aren't like necessarily the best thing you've seen in the world, but they're a good story and they make it enjoyable to watch. You sit there in the movie theater and you're interested in these characters and you want to see where it goes and leads. And the stuff they touch on, like death, remorse, you know, finding love, dealing with relationships, those things that are portrayed in the movie, I think they're accurately and honestly well executed in certain points.
Well, and not only that, but like you and I both mentioned after the movie, on top of it being good character development, good story, good things like that, movies like this have to be able to make you feel the things of the characters. And both you and I had similar moments in the movie where we looked at it and we went, during this exact same scene, we both got emotional. When Colin Farrell is playing his dad, talking to himself after his first heartbreak, oh my gosh, what an emotional scene. When Margot Robbie is 12 and talking to her mother who is since deceased and talking about her struggles and her trouble, it's gut-wrenching. I mean, when she goes to the hospital to see her mom on her deathbed, which she never got to do because she was off somewhere else making mistakes. These are scenes that not only give you great character development and backstory into these characters, but they make you feel what the characters felt, and they do a good job of it. And that is really more what these stories are about. When you talk about stuff like Game of Thrones and Oppenheimer and epic stories like that, you're looking for those epic things. But with something like this, you really want it to be at the bare bones of the story. Can you invest me in the characters? Can you invest me in the simple storyline that you're going to tell? And can you make me feel everything that you want me to feel? Well, I was genuinely interested in whether or not they were going to work. I was generally interested in finding every new interesting fact about their life. And when the emotions came up, whether they were good or bad or sad or whatever, I cared. And that's all you want this kind of a movie to do. I mean, Nicholas Sparks movies back to however many years you want to go back, they're very similar stories. I mean, people have commented for years that Nicholas Sparks writes from a prototype, basically, and he does. I love Nicholas Sparks, but he does. But the things that make his story so good is that he makes you care about the characters. He makes you care about what's going on and feel those emotions. And this movie does a good job of that. And on to the next thing, which you and I are always both a big fan of. The cinematography in this movie is actually gorgeous.
It's great.
It's
great.
I mean, one of my favorite scenes from this movie, Sarah and David get told that they get to stop for a break, and they climb up this huge winding mountain path. And, Sarah goes, oh, really? This can be called a break? And they get to the top, and they sit, and they're staring down over the top of this peak, and they're looking down on Earth from an outer space kind of view. It's
beautiful.
And it's beautiful. And
especially in the theater.
Oh, in the theater, it's gorgeous. Another good point as to why you should go see some of these things in theaters, because it would look nice on my TV, but man, it looked good in theaters. And it's stuff like that where it's very simple, and 100% it's just them sitting on rocks with a green screen behind them. But shots like that make all the difference in the world to really pull you into the kind of magic of that moment. Especially when you're doing something like this, where basically we're going to throw a really weird story at you. They're going to walk through mysterious doors, experience things from their past, and be able to tangibly bring them back into the present without having to give you any sort of explanation as to why or how that's being done. And it's done well.
Yeah. And not only that, when you go back in time with these characters, and you're going back to, obviously, one of the really good, I felt like, when they go back in time and they enter into the first door, is when David goes into his old high school play. And and I thought Colin Farrell kind of killed that, of playing like a 15-year-old kid, but he's a 40-year-old guy, and he's sort of going back to these memories.
It also had
and
one of my
he's
favorite
a person
one-liners. How old am I here? 15. Oh, okay, cool. So this is the spring play, and Margot Robbie goes, how old am I? And he goes, I don't know, 40 or something. And she just turns around, she goes, 40. I ought to kick your butt. You're 40. I'm not 40. I'll kill you.
I'll kill you. Like, it's just so funny. But yeah, not only that, listen, like there were some jokes here and there that obviously didn't land, but I feel like that's in every movie now, where it's like they're kind of trying to like force some things like to the wall and see if they stick. But no, I thought that first door that we go through, and then you see Colin Farrell and he's going through his whole old high school play, I thought that was interesting, and I thought it was great, to be honest. I thought Colin Farrell was really strong in this movie. I thought emotionally and acting wise, and playing, when he has to go and play a 15-year-old kid, he goes and does the play. And I thought he did a great job doing it. And I also thought he hit the emotional beats well. And there's two scenes that I want to talk about. It's one when Colin Farrell talks about revisits and talks to his dad at the hospital when he's born, and then he learns about all the health problems and all the complications of his birth, and that scene alone is so well done. It's awesome. And those are the types of scenes that I love to see, because then you get to appreciate, like, okay, like he gets this chance to experience life on Earth, experience time with his family, and go through. And he also is just like, has this understanding of like, holy crap, like I got to appreciate this life. I got to start living my life to the fullest, like after this. And that's just a great moment between a son and his father. And then you have
not only that, but going off of that scene, Colin Farrell's character David had always resented his parents because they had always told him he was special. And he thought that it overinflated his ego to the point where he always thought that somebody was going to come in his life that also thought he was special. So he sort of resented them for saying it constantly. Figuring out that he came a month premature and almost died as their parents' only kid, and them being so worried and stressed out in the hospital and everything else, and figuring out that's why they did that and how much he truly means as their son and how big of an impact that had on their life, therefore translating to how much it now means to his life and why that relationship with them is so important, was so impactful, even though it was just this little moment. It's one of those eye-opening things that I think as adults we don't see until we really start looking for it. You know, it's the little things that your parents do that you go, oh, gosh, that's annoying. But then you get the extra context and you're like, oh my gosh, they did all that because they really cared, or, you know, they just didn't want to bother me with the trouble or worry me or anything else. And this movie does a good job of bringing that in, and it's sort of an underrated storyline. It was one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie.
Yeah. And then you have, me and you both like this scene, is when they're at the dinner table with their previous relationships. And then honestly, you can talk about the cinematography in this too, but the way the scene is shot, edited, and then how it like all comes together is awesome. And that's when I was probably the most locked in, because you're seeing these characters probably at their most vulnerable, and a vulnerable place that they don't want to be in, that some of them have run away from. You know, Sarah, for example, always runs away at like the first sign of love. And anytime that she gets close in a relationship, she's like, I'm dipping. Like, we're out of here. Like, I don't think you know me. I don't think you know that. I guess you could say some of the writing in it is like, oh my God, like blah, blah, blah. That's so like Hollywood and, you know, theatrical. But like, it's good character development. It's good scenes. And Colin Farrell and both Colin Farrell's character David and Margot Robbie's character Sarah, seeing both of them go through these situations that they don't want to go through. Colin Farrell's character is literally like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, the comment that they make going up to the door, the first thing that they say is, "Do you recognize that door?" And Sarah goes, "Yeah, I don't want to go in there." And he goes, "Well, I definitely don't want to go in there." And they just do.
Yeah, and they both have like an uncomfortable experience together, but then they grow and they open up about like why their relationships didn't work and why they were scared or why they struggle to like find love or like stay in relationships. And I thought it was a great scene. I thought it was an awesome scene. And I thought it provided more character development for the characters. And it just made me buy in. And that's what I like the most, is because when you get these little moments and you get to the end of the movie and both these characters are sick of their journey and they're just done. And then you have this funny moment with the AI where they're like, come on, you just got to finish the journey. And she gives them a destination of both an hour and 33 minutes, and they both arrive at sort of like a similar destination of their backstory.
Right. They both want to go home. And exactly. So they, you know, the GPS tells them, okay, great, an hour and 33 minutes until you're home. And they pull up and it's both of their childhood homes.
Yeah. And it's beautiful moments like that, like the father scene with David, and then you have the relationship scene with Sarah and David. Those are moments that really make me dive in and like want to see how this story ends. Like, do they end up getting together? What's going on? And then how are they going to deal with like this heartbreak and stuff that they're going through? And I didn't find it to be, you know, the one thing that we talked about was the pacing could have been better. Obviously, it was a little slow in certain moments. And for a movie like this, I felt like it could have been way more faster, almost like, you know, we could get to like, you know, different moments or different doors or different situations, you know, at a faster pace. But overall, man, I thought the character development, I thought the cinematography was great. And I didn't mind, you know, some of the writing was cringe and stuff, but dude, you like those two scenes alone that we talked about are good enough to where you could be like, this movie was worth it to go watch in theaters, in my opinion.
Well, and I have a bit of a let's call it a slanted opinion on today's cringy lines. So when you're doing a romance movie, a lot of it's about being vulnerable, and some of those lines are now just considered cringy, but part of it is just being willing to being open and kind of, it's the same conversation that the GPS system is trying to get Colin Farrell and Margot Robbie to have. I mean, it's an underlying theme in the story is to make relationships work. You have to be honest. You have to be open. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be these sorts of things. And I think it's part of the reason why we don't get many stories like this nowadays. I mean, when you see romantic comedies or romantic dramas, you see people who basically run around cheating and causing destruction. And you know what? The Roses is a great example. We love The Roses. It was a great movie, but it was also just disaster after disaster after disaster.
Over the top.
Over the top. This movie has realistic relationship building blocks that could be a problem, and they can either be solved or stopped by being open, being honest, coming to the relationship with the intention of actually making it work, and not chasing the idea of a relationship, or not running away when things get too tough, like was David and Sarah's biggest problems. And storylines like that are what make characters like this really interesting and somebody that you can invest in. When you look at characters from The Roses, it's harder to get invested in two people who are basically egomaniacs. I don't care whose ego wins out, but I do want David and Sarah to kind of push aside their relationship problems to be able to get to a point where they could work it out in a healthy and productive relationship. It's those kinds of things that make these stories good. And they may be a little bit cringy for today's society, but it's also part of what makes a really good story, especially in this genre. You just have to be willing to take some of those chances. And you started it off by saying, we don't get much original content anymore. This is an original story. I wish we got more original content. There's a couple of other films this year that are truly original stories being told, but there's not a ton. And this one wasn't a 10 out of 10. Let's be honest. The pacing could have been better. Some of the writing could have been better. Margot Robbie's performance could have been better here and there, but it was still good and it was original. And we need more of that in cinema. The other thing that I do wish we got more of, and we talked about this right after we left the theater, is I wish we got just not a ton, but a smidge more of some of the side characters, the car rental people, the GPS AI. They were all so entertaining that a little bit more interaction with them on any side of the film, I think would have been a little bit entertaining, especially figuring out the role that the AI played. Was it something that was voiced by the car rental people, or was it truly just, this movie is very, I don't want to say magical, but magical in the sense of you're walking through random doors in the middle of nowhere and bringing back teddy bears, balloons, and chocolate. It's magical. Is the GPS magical, or was it run by other stuff? And huge spoiler, David gets back and returns his car at the end of this film. And he goes, okay, so this is a soulmate rental agency. And they go, no, actually the girl who was supposed to come and pick up her car, which by the way was his childhood sweetheart from high school, didn't come to pick up her car rental. Sarah came in last minute. I would love to have seen a little bit more with that. Like, even if it's just them setting out the next two photographs for the people to come in, or
that would have been epic.
Like something like that. That would have been cool. I don't need a lot more, but I would have loved a little more just to be like, oh, that's really cool. They're setting up the next set of dominoes to fall and something like that. So I didn't need a ton more from this film, but I did need a little bit more to kind of really push it from, oh, that was good to great.
Yes. And that would have been interesting to see a conversation with them of his high school sweetheart and them in the present day It would have been awesome. It would have been awesome.
Especially when the first door that he went through was confronting when he told her that he loved her at the play, and she basically tells him, I don't love you. I'm going to try and make it work out with this guy who's a jerk. Except when he walks through the door, he does it so much worse. When he describes it, he says he just tells her in the hallway and she goes on her way. Colin Farrell takes it to the stage and starts talking to her in the middle of the play in front of all the parents, and like
the amount of cringe that like, but it's a good cringe. It's like,
it is.
It's like, this would not happen if he wasn't, 40 years old and like mature and knew what happened. You know what I mean? So it's a good cringe where I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy's doing this right now, of like his high school crush. It's kind of ridiculous, but it's so funny. And then Margot Robbie like saves him by she ends up admitting that she's like a play, kind of a play geek, and she was a theater kid.
A mutual bonding point for them too. Yeah.
Yes. And it was like a really funny and then also like just good musical scene. So that moment right there, and then you're right, man. It's interesting that they had the picture of the high school sweetheart at the end, but if she would have showed up and was like, "Oh my God, I'm late," or something like that, and was like her silly, goofy self, and then Colin Farrell just absolutely fell head over heels and was like, had a conversation with her on like why it didn't work out and why he didn't, that big regret.
Right, having that kind of epiphany as an adult and being able to have that conversation, sort of figuratively and literally shutting the door on his first heartbreak, I think that would have been really poetic, especially as he's turning the car back in, as he's trying to move on and do all this other stuff. I think that would have been really cool. But, it wasn't bad as it stands. I just... like we talked about with a couple of things, I think there's some things that would have elevated it and made it a little bit better. And pacing is definitely one of those things. Though, let's go back to the first movie we saw. Him was 1 hour and 29 minutes. This movie was 1 hour and 50 minutes, so it was almost 2 hours long. I can tell you it didn't feel 2 hours long. It just didn't. It could have used faster pacing, yes. But when you sit through, and I'm going to bring up another review we did, Eddington. And it feels like it's 3 hours long, and it's only roughly about 2 hours long. And you're just begging for the movie to be over. That's when you know it's not good. This was not that. It was like, okay, this kind of felt like it was about 2 hours-ish, but not quite. And if it had moved a little faster, it would have been better. But it wasn't like, oh my gosh, quick, get me out of here. It was just, I could have used a little bit of quicken up the pace. That's it.
I enjoyed the story, man. And I really do think people just need to open up and be like, listen, it wasn't the best movie I've ever seen, but it was a good story. Okay. Was it the greatest acting I've ever seen? No, but they did a great job in certain moments, like to a point where not only am I emotionally invested into the characters, but I want to see how this ends. And yes, the writing could have been better, but there's certain moments in great writing to where I'm emotionally invested into what's going to happen. And I thought it was pretty funny and there was good moments in there. So I think people just have too high of a standard, especially for a drama or the genre like this. Like, I've been waiting for a movie kind of like this for a while, to at least for like this year. And I was excited going into this movie. And I still am like walking out of there being like, dude, I watched a good movie. I watched a good story. And I'm happy with the way they executed that. And I'm literally going to watch like I'm going to turn on this movie and I'm going to watch like certain scenes, because that's what I love to do. I love to turn on movies, like rewatch them or like skip certain parts and watch great moments in some of my favorite films. There's going to be moments that I watch and rewatch and make sure that I can like digest again, because I really did love some moments of this movie. I didn't love like the whole entire movie, but it was a good story. And I really do think people overreacted and just was like, oh, this is a bomb. This is terrible. You know, we have 2 A-list actors and they're not putting up their best performance. Like, stop just absolutely tearing something down just because it wasn't something on the like Oscar level. Like, can we not have something that's middle ground, that's, you know, right in between?
Not everything's going to be La La Land. Okay, listen.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
yeah, like I think people were expecting La La Land type level. It's like, stop.
Right. Well, and like, listen, La La Land was great, but also nobody, when that was coming out, expected that to be as good as it was going to be. Nobody.
Yes.
It was meant to be really good, and obviously the actors in it were amazing, but nobody turned around and went, oh, this is going to be the movie of the year. This is going to be award winning. No, they just expected it to be kind of a good and entertaining movie. And then it ended up being that way. But that can't be the benchmark for every romantic comedy or romantic drama coming after that. I mean, it not everything is going to be Oscar worthy, or it's not. And really, good storytelling is what I want to see in these movies. And this, for the most part, did that. And we've got other movies coming up this year. The next one that we're really excited about is Forgetting You. Super, super excited about that one. Yeah. The story looks great. And again, it's the story that looks great in that one. There's a couple of decent big actors. The gal who was in Megan and Megan 2 is playing the adult love interest. You've got a Franco playing the adult male love interest. You've got, you know, the Mythbusters star McKenna Grace and Scream star McKenna Grace playing the female high school interest. And you've got, a decent list of cast and a good story. But really, that's what you need out of these films, is a decent to good cast, good writing, and a good story. And this movie had some places where it could have done better, but it also could have been way, way, way worse.
Way worse. Way worse. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't, you know, I understand where people are coming from, but like I can't in some ways.
Yeah, which
is kind of annoying.
Like, so you sent me a reel before we did this.
People are getting too pretentious, man. They're just getting too pretentious about movies. It's kind of pissing me off.
They
but
are.
Like, whatever.
The reel that
it's annoying.
You sent me basically described Margot Robbie as this flaky, flimsy pixie character, and Colin Farrell as an unfeeling, horrible, awful character. Zero on-screen chemistry, bad story, not motivating at all, and dead on arrival were the first couple of like phrases that were used during this.
Insanity.
And I'm going,
like, what?
That's not close. Like, this was the thing that he saw before we went into the theaters, which had us so bummed out. And I'm going to swing this right into my score. Mine's a 7.2. Absolutely nowhere near that depiction for the movie. It was charming. It got me emotional. It made me laugh. The characters were entertaining. The storytelling was good, faltered at some times, but good. And the character development was great. 7.2, and not nearly as bad as the kind of pretentious outlook that podcast gave as a review. Not dead on arrival, certainly.
No. And we can disagree. It's not that big of a deal, but you know, people can have their own opinions, but I just, you know, I felt like it was not that bad of a movie. I didn't think it was as bad as everyone says it was. They were killing it. You know, I saw articles that was like, it was like it's a bust, you know. But no, my score is a 7.2. I'm gonna give you the same score.
All right. Yeah.
Screw it.
Hey,
7.4.
Oh,
why not?
Okay. All right.
I'll give it a 7.4. I didn't think this was that bad of a movie. I love the connection that Colin Farrell and Margot Robbie had. Obviously there were things that could have been better, but is it the worst thing I've ever seen? No. And for the genre, it's a good movie. It's a good movie. And it's one of those middle of the road. Like, it's one of those middle ground movies where it's like, you're either going to like appreciate the movie and be like, okay, there were some parts where I liked it. And, you know, I thought for me, there's multiple parts that I liked. So you know, I can go back and appreciate those moments and appreciate those scenes. And the cinematography is great. The way it's shot, the storytelling, character development isn't bad. It's almost honestly great at some moments. So I give it a 7.4. I didn't think this movie was as bad as everyone says it is. And that just kind of proves to you that everyone has different opinions, and you can go watch a movie and, you know, just because it has a 58% on Rotten Tomatoes doesn't mean it's terrible. You know, go watch it and see what happens.
Unless it's him, in which case,
exactly,
trust the rating.
In that case,
yeah.
Sometimes the ratings are right. Sometimes the ratings are right, but in this case, they're wrong.
Right. In this particular scenario, the ratings are wrong. In the case of him, they're correct. We'll see if the ratings are correct next week. I believe it's next week. I may be wrong about that, but shortly upcoming. We also have One Battle After Another, which is Leonardo's next big venture. I've heard nothing but good buzz. We'll also be doing a podcast soon discussing Marvel and some of the let's call them speed bumps that they've run into recently with some of the news surrounding that. And of course, we'll be probably doing some double features again, because lots more good movies. So stick with us, and see you lads.